The stage was set. Ann Coulter, known for her razor-sharp tongue and unrelenting facts, was about to face off with Whoopi Goldberg on The View. What began as a standard discussion quickly spiraled into one of the most unforgettable moments in daytime television history. Whoopi, as expected, came armed with her usual playbook of race-baiting rhetoric. But Ann, she countered with a calm, unshakable resolve that left Whoopi and the entire panel stunned. This wasn't just another debate. It was a showdown of ideas, a collision of worldviews, and it was about to get intense. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one plays out. It all started innocently enough when Whoopi decided to bring up Ann's latest book, clearly eager to corner her on the topic of race. With a tone dripping in condescension, Whoopi asked, "You've been pretty vocal about race and politics. Care to explain what you really mean in this book?" Ann, without missing a beat, leaned back in her chair, completely unfazed. "Absolutely, Whoopi. What I mean is exactly what I wrote. Liberal policies have done more harm than good for Black Americans, and race-mongering only divides us further." The room went dead silent. Whoopi's signature smirk faltered for the briefest of moments, a crack in her usual composure. The battle lines were drawn, and the tension was palpable. This wasn't just a conversation, it was a confrontation.
Was good for who?
Yes, because you had millions of white people watching with the equivalent of what in New York we used to refer to as the Brooklyn juries, who simply would not convict even guilty Black criminals.
Instead of addressing Ann's point, Whoopi immediately shifted into an emotional rebuttal, accusing Ann of oversimplifying the complex issue of race in America. She let Whoopi finish, but when it was her turn, Ann's response was nothing short of a masterclass in dismantling rhetoric. "Whoopi," Ann began, her voice steady and unwavering, "if you're going to talk about race, at least get your facts straight." The audience leaned in, sensing the tension. "You just claimed that liberal policies have helped, but let's talk about the real impact, welfare dependency skyrocketing, crime rates soaring in Democrat-run cities. These aren't opinions, Whoopi, they're facts." With those words, Ann didn't just challenge Whoopi's perspective, she dismantled the foundation of her argument. It was a moment that left everyone in the room rethinking their stance.
Not innocent Black
Hold up, Miss
criminals.
Coulter. Please stop. Please stop. If you're going to talk about race, at least know what you're talking about. At least know what you're talking about. Well, tell me how much you know about being Black.
Well, this isn't about being Black.
Well, but you just said you just made all these statements about how Black people feel. Tell me how you know that. Yeah.
Whoopi, visibly agitated, shot back, "What do you know about being Black, Ann? You can't possibly understand." Her words were sharp, but Ann's reply came swift and brutal, cutting through the tension in the room. "This isn't about me or you, Whoopi. It's about policies and results. The numbers don't lie, even if you'd rather ignore them." A collective gasp echoed from the audience. Whoopi's usual tactic, playing the race card, wasn't landing this time. The tables had turned. What followed was a back and forth that could only be described as verbal chess. Whoopi tried to pivot, shifting the conversation to historical injustices, accusing Republicans of perpetuating racism with the so-called Southern strategy. But Ann was ready. "Actually, Whoopi," she said, her voice firm, unwavering, "the Southern strategy is a myth. Republicans were winning in the South long before that narrative was spun. And let's not forget, it was Republicans who elected the why. First Black congressman. Look it up." The silence in the studio was deafening. Whoopi, now visibly flustered, struggled to regain control. "So you're saying Republicans are saints? Give me a break," she shot back, hoping to salvage her stance. But it was clear. The ground beneath her was quickly crumbling. The room was on edge, the atmosphere electric, and the stakes higher than ever. Ann's composure remained unshaken, and Whoopi's smirk was nowhere to be seen.
Tell me what you're trying to say in this book. Because we don't know what you're trying to say.
What I'm trying to say is race mongering has been very bad for America. liberals use it to promote causes that have nothing to do with blacks and in fact harm blacks. And that excellent lead-in you just gave about OJ, I mean, I think that was the moment, having lived near New York City in the 70s and 80s, which was the golden era. It was like Trayvon Martin and Duke lacrosse case every day. With the OJ verdict, white America said, that's it, the white guilt bank is shut down, and that ended up being the best thing that ever happened to black Americans.
What are you talking about?
I meant that no longer...
Being acquitted was good for whom?
Yes, because you had millions of white people watching with the equivalent of what in New York we used to refer to as the Brooklyn juries, who simply would not convict even guilty black criminals, not innocent black
Hold up,
criminals.
Miss Coulter. Please stop. Please stop. If you're going to talk about race, at least know what you're talking about. Tell me how much you know about being black.
Well, this isn't about being black.
Well, but you just said you just made all these statements about how black people feel.
Not a book about black people. It is a book about white liberals. And I do know, and this is a fact, that once for years, Republican policies on crime and welfare, for example, were called racist. When they finally got implemented after the OJ verdict, I might add, by crime Giuliani in New York, Reagan and Bush judges overall, tens of thousands of black lives were saved. That is a fact. I don't have to know about being black.
No, Ann replied, her tone unwavering and resolute. I'm saying that liberals have exploited race for political gain, all while offering no real solutions. 5 minutes after the Civil Rights Act, everything became a civil rights issue. From abortion to homelessness. How does that help black Americans? The audience, usually quick to rally behind Whoopi, seemed hesitant. Even the panel, typically so quick to chime in, was caught off guard, unsure of how to respond. The air in the studio grew thick with tension. Whoopi, now visibly frustrated, repeatedly interrupted Ann, attempting to derail the conversation, but Ann remained unshaken, laser-focused on her point. You keep saying this is about race, Whoopi, Ann countered, her voice steady but forceful. But what about accountability? What about policies that actually uplift communities, rather than keeping them dependent on government handouts? The words hung in the air, leaving a palpable silence. Ann's argument wasn't just bold, it was a challenge to the status quo, and Whoopi was struggling to keep pace.
Because your facts are just a little shaky. I mean, you're saying that because black people, because liberals are what? Because liberals have abandoned black people now, because what? I don't get it. I don't understand.
I don't think liberals ever cared about black people. I mean, 5 minutes after the Civil Rights Act of '64, they start calling everything that has nothing to do with black people a civil rights issue.
Wait a second.
Abortion on demand, homeless rights.
So are you saying that liberals don't care about black people? Then are you saying Republicans embrace us in a warm, fuzzy?
Try to. We're not embraced back. But yeah, we tried to.
So wait a minute. So the Southern strategy was a white liberal thing? No, it was a Republican thing.
No.
And also, Newt Gingrich calls President Obama the food stamp president. That's not racist? Wait a second.
Do you really think that was? Do you believe it was racist for Newt to say that the president is a food stamp president?
Well, he
Can you
wouldn't
dive
say
into
it
that?
if we
Like,
could
you're
just
Whoopi attempted to counter, but her points came out scattered, laced with emotion rather than substance. Meanwhile, Ann remained a pillar of composure, delivering fact after fact with laser-sharp precision. Then came the knockout punch. Isn't it ironic? Ann asked, her voice cutting through the tension. The loudest voices on race are often the ones making everything about race. If you keep framing every issue as black versus white, how do we ever move forward? The audience erupted in applause, the weight of Ann's words settling over the room. Whoopi, clearly caught off guard, muttered something under her breath, trying to regain control. But by then, the damage was done. The audience was on Ann's side, and Whoopi was left scrambling for a response.
I'm not a big fan of Newt, so we could just skip that for a second and get to the Southern strategy. Because I've specifically disproved it. It's an absolutely liberal folklore. Republicans were winning the South since 1920. It was the outer states of the South. It was Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia.
Voting. What are you talking about? We weren't
Well,
allowed
who
to
was
vote.
trying to get them to vote? Republicans were.
Yeah,
and the first black congressmen were all Republicans. And the first black governor was a Republican.
You're talking about way back.
The Democratic segregationists were all liberal Democrats. It is a lie that they were conservative Democrats. It
was a
Jay.
segregationist, darling. And, you know,
The
basically,
Republicans weren't.
everybody was. White people were. It didn't matter whether they were
Absolutely
Republicans
were
or
not.
Ask you a question.
The first integration
Listen to my grandmother, who was there, who remembers what
Howard
happened.
Baker, an aggressive integrationist, first Republican elected in Tennessee to the Senate. You have Winthrop Rockefeller, first Republican.
Democrats. So in my view, and I have a different one from you, it looks as though the Republicans are really going against blacks, not the liberals.
No, and this
what do
is
you
a
say to
perfect
that?
example. Yes, it is, and it's a perfect example. No, I'll explain why. Of liberals using the label of civil rights to promote a liberal cause they support, i.e. voter fraud. In fact, one of the first states in the Union to pass voter ID bills was Rhode Island, 85% Democratic legislature. And who pushed it? A black Democrat in the House, a black Democrat in the Senate. Because that is not...
As the segment wrapped up, it was crystal clear who had won the debate. Ann's calm, fact-based approach had completely dismantled Whoopi's emotionally charged arguments. The contrast was stark. While Whoopi floundered, Ann remained unshaken, delivering each point with surgical precision. The panel, usually so eager to weigh in, looked defeated, their silence speaking volumes.